Joanna.
That's me.
She came all the way from South Carolina to be here. Just to be here. I'm going to let her tell you how we met. But I hooked up with her in Atlanta, Georgia. And that's a whole nother story with my presentation. But she's going to give us some stats now. She's been to 14 major cities. She wrote a book when I was a child. That poster right there. She asked all these homeless folks, what do you want to be when you grow up? Baseball player, doctor, dentist. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a wrestler. They're all right there in that poster. This lady up here is unbelievable. Jonah and I stopped at her house. She's got some books over there. They're $10 just to cover the cost of making the books. And like I said, she's been to 14 major cities. Here she is, 5'0", going into these homeless camps on Skid Row in San Francisco. She goes to Miami, Florida. She goes to Seattle, Washington. She goes all over the world. All over the United States. And by the way, she's been to Vietnam and Cuba too. But I want to introduce her to you. She's my good friend, Joanna, all the way from South Carolina. She's going to give you some stats right now.
I'm the numbers girl. When I started this, actually, I planned to do a photo documentary. I'm an artist back in Charleston, which is really cool because my 30 years of starting with Kodachrome really lended itself to this particular work. And because I'm only 5'3", going into these places, I'm not threatening. I mean, people are willing to talk to you, especially when you show up in a pair of sweatpants and sneakers. So I started this, 2 years ago, and I pulled the point-in-time census up. And basically, when I came across this man in Skid Row, I didn't realize it was a human being. I thought, wow, this person has everything they own in garbage bags, and then I looked at it again and realized that was a person trying to keep warm. That was a rude awakening, let me tell you. And I asked every person that I interviewed, when you're a kid, what'd you want to be? Ask any child what they want to be. You're going to get answers like, I want to be a doctor or a baseball player. I want to be a teacher. None of them are ever going to look at you and say, oh, when I grow up, I want to be homeless. That is not something we aspire to. I don't think anywhere in the world that is something that we aspire to. Just the facts. The point-in-time census. Last year in January, we counted 552,830 homeless persons across the country. That is a very low number. It's an increase of 3% over 2017. The state of Connecticut is up 17.4%. They counted last year 3,976 homeless individuals. The real counts, they're nearly up by 1 million. I'll explain why. This is literally done in every county, in every state across the country in January. Thousands of volunteers across the country get together. They get this big form. It's from the Housing and Urban Development, and they set out and they count as many homeless persons as they can find. Depending on who's counting, they may or may not go into different places. So depending upon where they are, they may or not go into some of the places because people are afraid. I understand that. I don't have any fear. Maybe that's not a good thing, but I just jump right in with both feet. So it is an estimate, and it tells us from what we can get from them, who they are, where they live, how they came to be homeless. But why is it just an estimate? And that's really important. It's only an estimate because of the way Housing and Urban Development makes us count them. There are entire populations of people that aren't counted. If you are panhandle enough during the day and you manage to get yourself into a hotel for the night, you're not counted. If you're in an emergency room, if you're temporarily in jail, anyone who's found a friend to stay with for the night or even a week, you're not counted. Anyone who's managed to get a voucher from the city or the county and you're being put up for even a week, you're not counted because you're, quote, no longer homeless. FEMA, all the people that were just made homeless by all of our disasters and FEMA had given these people vouchers, they were not counted. They're still homeless. They just got a voucher to temporarily give them some help, but they are homeless. And of course, we have an entire group of people that have said, you know what, I'm done. You count me every year, you ask me all these intrusive questions, and 5 years later, I'm still on the street. and they simply aren't going to be counted anymore. Meet Myesha. She is another reason why the counts are not accurate. Myesha was from Tennessee. I met her in D.C. Woman has worked since she's 16 years old. She's done everything from house cleaning to stocking shelves in grocery stores. Very proud of her work history. She fell. She got hurt. Her boyfriend didn't want to take care of her. Said it was a burden. She left. She couldn't get the medical care that she needed. Smart enough, she researched where she could get the help she needed. She set out for D.C., where she was a homeless individual. And she said she's living in a tent. And she said to me, I'm doing everything that they're telling me to do. I'm getting my medical help, and I'm going to get back on my feet. So what happens to the count? Tennessee goes down by 1, D.C. goes up by 1, but it really hasn't changed because she's just shifted locations. Geographically, the homeless are very good at this. A place where they are not welcome any longer, they'll simply shift a county. If they can manage to panhandle enough to get to another city, another state, they'll go there. So that makes the counts inaccurate. From what I know, what they taught me, our counts are really about 1 million homeless individuals across the country. Once upon a time, I had a home. I met Nathan in New York City. He is an artist. He's written for Marvel Comics. And his troubles began when his identity was stolen. His parents are deceased. He doesn't have any resources. And he could not untangle the amount of damage to his credit, losing his place where he was living, and finally gave up and landed on the street. But I asked him, what did you want to be when you were a kid? He said, well, I wanted to do the illustrations. I've written for them, but I haven't done the illustrations. Just the facts. 552,830. That's what the official count is. I know it's wrong, but that's what we've got to work with. 111,592, they're children under the age of 18. 37,878 are veterans. Huge numbers. 2-year waiting period for our vets on the street. Why? I don't get that. 194,467 of these people, they're living in the woods, they're living in cars, they're living under bridges, they're living in abandoned houses, and they are hiding. A lot of them are hiding because we have made it so shameful to be poor, so shameful to be in need, and we've humiliated them, and we walk by them like they don't exist, like they're invisible. And so we've got nearly 200,000, although my guess is that that's probably closer to 500,000. 5 states with the highest counts: California, New York, Florida, Texas, Washington State. For the 3rd year in a row, Seattle has skyrocketed. It's a cold state. It's a miserable state if you're homeless. Ran into a situation there where I was talking with somebody in the park, and a police officer came over. There was an open beer under the bench we were sitting on. And he thought I was, one of the homeless. And he started to go on about, you can't have open containers, and he was going to write a ticket. And I stood up and I said, hi, I'm Joanna Biondolillo. I'm an artist from Charleston, South Carolina, doing a photo documentary on the homeless. Would you like to see my ID? And he backed right down. And he said, well, I've got to tell you, my body camera's on. I said, good, because the law should have a problem with the fact that we're sitting here having a conversation. And then I watched him as he went to other homeless folks and wrote them tickets. Vanessa, met her in Seattle. Cool lady, total IT. Showed me how to use my GPS. I'm a paper map girl, didn't know how to use GPS. I'm dashing out of the Seattle airport. It's rush hour. Never been to Seattle. No clue where I'm going. And I'm walking, and I hear this voice behind me say, would you like to help the homeless? Oh, dead stop, about face. She's homeless. She's working to help the homeless while she's homeless. So we meet, we get together. This woman was a chef. She broke her ankles, showed me the photographs of her ankles. She's got a cane. She is living in her van. She's got herself enrolled in college for cyber forensics. She says to me, nobody cares if I walk with a cane. They just want to know, how fast can my fingers run across the keyboard, and does my brain work? So in a few years, this woman will get out of her van, and she will get back into a house. And I asked her, I said, what do you miss? And she said, I miss being able to take a hot shower whenever I want. I miss being able to make a grilled cheese on a whim. I miss having my books in a bookcase. I miss being able to do homework at a desk. I miss having my clothes hang in a closet instead of stuffed in bags. Chuck, veteran, another fabulous guy, blown up by an IED in Iraq. Gets phone call. Child's killed in a car accident. They get him back to the States, and and it was before the IED issue. Wife has a nervous breakdown. Guy's got a 401k. They go through all their money trying to bury the daughter and get the wife help. He goes back to the service. He gets blown up, comes back. The money's gone. The marriage doesn't survive. He is now living on the street because he's arguing with the VA because he was a reservist and got blown up as opposed to being full-time and getting blown up. POW, Vietnam. Amazing guy. Tortured, metal plate in his head, arguing over veterans' benefits. They don't want to acknowledge Agent Orange. They don't want to acknowledge a lot of the things that our Vietnam veterans came home with. He said, you know what? I served my country. I came home hated for it. But I was okay because I had my wife, which turned out to be a double-edged sword because she was African American. And he said after she died, he had no use for his own life, landed on the street. And I asked him what he wanted to be when he was a kid. And he said, I wanted to be like my father. He was my best friend, a Marine pilot. Reasons why people become homeless: 60 to 67% of our homeless fall in these categories: domestic violence, loss of a job, death of a spouse or loved one, aged out of foster care, veteran, catastrophic illness, loss of a home or apartment due to foreclosure, fire, natural disaster, eviction, lack of affordable housing, physical disability. Not what most people think, but that is and that comes right out of HUD. So for as useless as they are, that particular information is important. Mandy, fabulous. Perfect example, aged out of foster care, running from domestic violence. There actually is, through Title I, a program that tries to bridge the gap between 18 and 21 for kids who've been in foster care, where they can learn a trade. Mandy did manage to get a cosmetology license, met up with this guy, thought for the first time in her life she's going to have a real family. Father died at age 10, mother abandoned her and her siblings. That's how she ended up in foster care. And she thinks, I've met this fabulous guy, we're going to have a life. Tries to strangle her. She gets out of the hospital. She has nowhere to go. She's on the streets of Chicago. I asked her what that was like, and she said, people walk by me and tell me to get a job. I've tried. It isn't easy. The only clothes I've got on. And I asked her what else troubled her about being homeless. She said, it's getting enough to eat. It's staying physically safe and getting enough to eat. And she said, the restaurants throw perfectly good food away. I know when some of them do that. I try to get to it before the rats do. Maria speaks 3 languages. Met her in Miami. Maria, how'd you get to speak 3 languages? She said, when I was a kid in the 4th grade, I lived near the UN. We went on a field trip to the UN. And the woman there said, if you want to be a translator, you have to speak several languages. So I learned French and Creole. She can't afford the rent. In Miami, they require a first month's rent, a last month's rent, and a security deposit, which, coupled with what the rents are, runs about $5,000 to $6,000. Now, that's tough enough for someone who's got a job. How does she come up with that kind of money to get in the door? And she's not turned a light on yet. And then she pointed to her few belongings and said, I can't take what I've got with me to and from work every day. Yet she speaks 3 languages and she's languishing on the street. The other 30 to 37%, difficulty with the law, mental, emotional illness, substance or alcohol abuse. All 3 together don't even reach 40% of our homeless population. Pretty interesting. The homeless experience a rapid deterioration in their health. respiratory lung disease because they're always breathing in toxins, spinal and bone problems from sleeping on concrete or standing on concrete for hours on end trying to panhandle, skin diseases and rashes because they're exposed to the sun, the heat, they don't have regular showers, they're not wearing clean clothes, kidney issues because they get dehydrated, bladder problems because they don't have access to toilets, tooth decay, gum disease, huge problem. Dental is the first thing that goes. Vitamin deficiencies due to lack of proper nutrition. Physical and mental exhaustion, which contribute to stress-related disorders and mental illnesses. I guarantee you that the mental illness population, a lot of these people go out onto the street and they're fine. The longer they're out there, the more likely they are to develop some type of mental disorder, some kind of emotional problem from the stress of being on the street and what that means, trying to stay alive. Average life expectancy is 47 years old. That's third world average life expectancy right here in America, the richest country on the planet. Raymond, love this guy, met him under a bridge. My father was a wife beater who taught my mother how to be a child abuser. She was an educated woman. She was a teacher. I just want to wake up in the morning and turn the coffee pot on. How many mornings do you think I wake up and turn my coffee pot on that this guy isn't in my head? Every day since I've met him nearly 2 years ago. The question is, do you want to take a chance of doing something good, or you want to be in the judgment business? Oh, I can't give that person money. They'll buy drugs with it. They'll buy alcohol with it. Maybe, but maybe they'll get something to eat. Maybe they'll do something good with the money. Lewis did. Met Lewis on Skid Row. Openly admitted he screwed up. That's why he's on the street. Would like to get back in the game, but doesn't know how. I give him some money. I walk over, I'm chatting with somebody else on Skid Row, and I see him come up to another gentleman with a brown bag. And he starts handing the guy food. And I looked up and I went, Lewis? He said, what? You bless me, so now I'm blessing him. Austin, Texas, July. It's 103 degrees. I meet Chris. He used to play football. He didn't have any water. And I was really nervous about that. And I'm like, Chris, here's a few bucks. Go get some water. No, I don't want to take it. I said, Chris, I'm going to insist. Take the friggin' money. Go get some water. I walk away. I'm under a bridge talking to some other folks, and I feel a tap on my shoulder. Here, I bought you one, too. Another I was able to give a few bucks to, bought food for his dog, Bella. Wanted something cold to drink. Needed bus fare to pick up HIV meds. Wanted a cheeseburger, wanted to stay in a shelter that cost $7 a night, wanted to buy toilet paper, wanted water. One woman just wanted to sleep in a bed in a place that allows you to rent in blocks of time. So if you've got 5 hours worth of money, you can stay there for 5 hours and rest. You know, we've got to pink slip the judgment business. We truly do. Because you give a gift, you don't monitor the gift, and you're not giving them your life savings. You're giving them a few bucks. And no, I'm not naive enough to think that they're all going to do right with it. But I'm willing to give the gift and let it go in the hope that it does something for that person. And frankly, if I were them, I might be buying a beer too. Heck, there are days in my life where I go home, pour myself a toddy for the body, and I got a place to go. So this is old school. He was fantastic. Sat down with him on Skid Row. We're chit-chatting away. I said, so how'd you come to be out here? He said, well, I never knew my dad. My mom had a massive stroke when I was 13. We didn't have any food in the house, and I was worried social services was going to come and they were going to take my brothers and I away. He said, we had 4 grocery store bags, paper bags. So I walked down to the grocer. I opened them up in the cart, and I stuffed them full of as much food as I could and walked out. He said, remember, back then there aren't any cameras. Nobody questioned me. I had my food in the bags from the store. I said to him, you sound like a clever kid. He said, I was a clever kid. The problem was, then the rent came due. and I stole to pay the rent. He said, I'm sorry that I stole. And in the end, of course, it didn't work. You know, his mother died. The kids were split up. It didn't work. But from the perspective of a 13-year-old, he was doing right. He was trying to keep his family together. And it just failed. The system failed. Harvey, 30 years with Greyhound. House burned in San Bernardino. He said, didn't matter. I didn't have insurance, but I had my job. I had a career with Greyhound. He loved trucks. His uncle used to take him out on big 18-wheelers when he was a kid, and he loved it, and he wanted to, so he ended up driving for Greyhound. And then he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Can't drive a bus if you've got Parkinson's. Lost everything, lost what was left. Bonnie, English teacher. I'm going blind. She would not let me photograph her, which I always respected. I always asked permission to take photographs. She taught in the 60s and 70s. Well, what did we pay teachers then? $6,500 a year, right? $7,000 a year. She can't pay the Miami rent, even with her pension and her Social Security. It doesn't even cover a small apartment. She's going blind. And I'm thinking, why aren't we fixing this woman's cataracts? She could get her up in a hotel somewhere, get her up in an apartment somewhere, and she can tutor. That can be her payment. She works with literacy programs. How are we letting this woman go blind who educated hundreds and hundreds of children in the course of her career? Richard surrendered at age 3, fabulous artist, unbelievable. I have his art on the wall in my house. He let me buy a piece of his art. It was a drawing. It was stunning. Surrendered at 3, ward of the state. Why don't the shelters work? They don't work. And all of this is data that I gathered from the homeless. None of this is anything that came out of my head. I'm so art-brained that wouldn't have even come into my head. Bed bugs, body lice, theft, fighting, violence, drug use, separation of families, dehumanizing treatment. They won't allow pets. You often can't bring your own food in. Limited amount of time one can come into a shelter, even if working. So meet Leon. Leon was living in a home that burned. He is working day work in Austin, Texas. He gets done, but it's 6 o'clock. But in the shelter, you have to be in the shelter by 7 in Austin. Unfortunately, day workers have to pick up their pay. It's day. He may not work the next day. So he takes a bus, he goes to get the money, and if he is at 7:02, they will not let him in. Now, he can provide proof of where he was, and they still won't let him in. Things that further complicate homelessness, bulldozing their tent communities. All that does is drive them further underground, further into the woods. Moving people from shelter to shelter because HUD is set up based on funding. So if you've got 10 vacant beds there and 3 over here, you better take people from over here and bus them over to that shelter, or that shelter's not going to get money. Nice way. I mean, these people are not pawns, but that's how the funding works. Enacting laws to make it harder to get Medicaid, enacting laws that make it harder to get food assistance. We waste 40% of our food supply every year, and that's probably a low estimate, and we're going to fuss over giving somebody a food card? Raising the rent of those receiving housing assistance and giving HUD unlimited authority to raise rents at any given time. That was proposed this past year. The people who are already poor, they want to raise their rent by 5% and be able to raise it whenever they want to without warning. Provide housing in areas that are limited for transportation and job opportunities. What basically communities do is they pick the places further out to hide the problem. And then they don't have transportation to get where they need to go. Recently, I had to pay some tax. I don't know what the heck it was. I get so many tax bills, I can't stand it. But I had to pay a tax, and they'd forgotten to do something which would have lowered my taxes a little bit. So I go to the office, and the woman says to me, "Oh, we changed. Now you got to go down to Lockwood Avenue." Okay, so I get in my car, I go to Lockwood Avenue. And the woman does what she's got to do, and she says, "Well, now you got to take this over to the auditor so they can record it." I say, okay. I get in the car, I go to the auditor. Well, now I got to go to the Treasury because I got to pay it still. 3 hours later, with my car, How do we expect homeless people who do not have transportation to go office to office to office, to get ID, to get other things that they need, to stay on waiting lists, etc.? They have no money. How do they get there? I was frustrated that day, but laughing to myself, because if that's all I had to do was go, I was in good shape. No problem. Ticketing the homeless for sleeping on the ground. Yeah, believe it or not, we do that. Having to go places over and over in order to remain on waiting lists, lack of counseling services. Robert, dying of cancer. I met him in Austin. He said to me, I never thought at 50 I would be on the street. I've been getting so many tickets for sleeping on the ground. I have no place to go. Most people out here have lost their faith. I love God with all my heart. I tell them they've got to believe God wouldn't bring us this far to drop us. He has since passed away. Bruce, ward of the state. Father was a junkie, didn't talk about his mom, met him in D.C. Sweet as a summer day. I kept running into him. He kept hugging me. He was the nicest guy ever. And he said to me, he said, I don't blame people for what they've got. What gets to me is the rejection out here. We were all children once. Affordable housing crisis. Basically, our rents are just skyrocketing all over the country for people who have jobs and don't have jobs. Right now, we have 37.9 million Americans that live at or below poverty. We have 11 million Americans that spend 50% of their income on rent alone. 1.7 million Americans that we know of don't have running water. And when asked, 70% of Americans will say they live paycheck to paycheck. The actual number is 78%. Huge, huge numbers. And the divide is going like this, so that we've got this top group, and then we've got everybody else. And then there's a smaller group that's managing to hang on to their middle class status. But the divide is really starting to grow again. Eric, met him in Chicago. His mom got breast cancer. And as a good son, he went home. He quit his job, went home to take care of her. After she died, the lease is in her name. He had no resources, no job, landed on the street. I said to him, why don't you go to the shelter? He said to me, I'd rather die than go there. And immediately, being a book lover, I think of A Christmas Carol. Because Scrooge is in the bank, and he says to the people who want donations, when they ask him for money, are there no workhouses? Are there no shelters? And the response is, many would rather die than go there. In his response, then let them do so and decrease the surplus population. His arm was so disfigured from an infection he got at a shelter. No way to go back. Beverly can't afford the rent. She was renting a room and the place burned. She does take refuge at a shelter. She's 66. While I'm there, a gentleman walks by, opens up his backpack, and says, I seem to remember you like peanut butter and jelly, and hands her a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. How do we fix this? The homeless are really smart, and they told me how to go after this. Unfortunately, trying to get housing and urban development, or anyone in a situation where we could take our money and reinvest it so that we can get more than half of these people off the street, is like beating your head against a brick window or brick wall. Reinvest the funds and create a system that gets them out of homelessness in 2 to 4 years. And the reason it's 2 to 4 years is as soon as you go to apply for credit, as soon as you go to apply to live somewhere, they want to know where you lived for the last 2 years. So picture this. And I did nothing but take their info and put it together. You got a 6-story building. Top floor are the Vanessas of the world, the fully functioning people who just had something catastrophic happen, but they can work full-time or go to school full-time. They may already have a degree or some skill. They're on the top floor because what they need is minimal. They may need some counseling and some help getting some IDs and things together, but they're functional and they're up and running. 5th floor are the part-timers. Those are the people that can work part-time but still need a little bit more help. They may be on the street longer and they need more counseling. 3rd floor, or 4th floor rather, are all of the Bonnies, all of the seniors, and the population going from 62 and up now in homelessness, astronomical. Biggest jump this year in California, and they have almost 130, well, they have just under 130,000 that they counted. Biggest jump was 62 plus. Senior citizens, they got a whole world of experience, a whole lifetime. They know so much. You fix somebody like Bonnie's eyes, you put her up on the 4th floor, and in return, while she's getting some things established and taking those pensions and saving it, because you're getting them bank accounts, you're helping them save, her payment back, she's working with literacy programs. She's helping other people with their reading or other skills that she can help with. We have an enormous opportunity with our seniors, and we're missing it. The next floor down are people without any tools in the toolbox. There are people who've aged out of foster care. There are people who, for whatever reason, don't have a high school diploma. They need a GED. So they need more time because we've got to get them a skill. We've got to help them finish their education. And maybe some of these kids will decide they're going to go on to college, or maybe some of these middle people will decide to go on to college. But it makes sense to grab them while you can and educate them, because I can tell you the longer they stay out there, the less likely they ever are to come off the street. And that's on us. That is on us. And then finally, we have families. We got to have a place for these families. We can't say, oh, I'm sorry, it's a women and children's shelter only. How do we make good dads? How do we get these people functioning as a family unit if we're tearing them apart and temporarily housing them somewhere? And then the very first floor, these people do not have to run around like I did, going to 4 different offices, because it's all on the first floor. The computer room. Ever tried applying for a job lately? If you don't have a computer, no help. I mean, really, what are you going to do, take out the want ads? You got to apply online now. So it's got a computer room, it's got counseling, a doctor comes once a week. You know, you've got all of your services there, mail, all of it in the first floor. And in 2 to 4 years, I guarantee you, we would have our homeless count across this nation down by more than half. It's not complicated. Raymond, when I was a child, I wanted to work in the field of biology. Nikki, when I was young, I liked sociology a lot. I would have liked to have worked in that. When I was a child, I wanted to be a Power Ranger. When I was a child, I wanted to be a paleontologist. John and Lisa met on the street, fell in love. John is a vet, Lisa's an artist. Sonny lost his apartment after his girlfriend died and it was in her name. They wouldn't let him take it over. When I was a child, I wanted to be a dancer. When I was a child, I wanted to be a hairdresser. When I was a child, I wanted to be a mechanic. When I was a child, I wanted to be a veterinarian. When I was a child, I wanted to be a basketball coach. And if you think we are not each other's keeper, Charles Dickens can help you with that. Marley comes to see Scrooge because he wants him to know that he's going to end up like him if he doesn't hurry up and change his ways. And Scrooge says to him, "You were always a good man of business." And Marley gets angry and says to him, "Business, mankind, was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business." Thanks for letting me share what they taught me.
Amazing.
The manual is in the back. My hope is that you will read it, pass it on to somebody else so that they will read it and pass it on. And the donation only pays for the printing because I've paid for everything out of pocket and I still work full time and I'm single income households. So it just pays for a printer that I got to donate the printing at a really cheap cost. It allows me to keep printing and keep passing them out.
Thank you very, very much. We got to do a battery check right here, but I'd just like to say when you heard about heroin and cocaine, you thought of the north end of Hartford. You thought of the inner cities. You thought of the Father Panic Village in Bridgeport. You thought of the Green in New Haven. You heard of the inner cities. But heroin And opiates become a huge, huge epidemic in the United States. And it's not the inner city anymore. It's in Glastonbury middle schools. We got kids dropping dead from heroin each and every day, each and every day. My buddy, Steve Zen from Atlanta, who we went to visit, carries a Narcan with him. He brought 3 people back. It's a big, big problem. And you set? I got a brother here who's very instrumental on working the opiate crisis. He works with members in the locals that have opiate problems. And he's here to say a few words. He's a very good friend of mine, and his name is Kyle Zimmer, and he's the operator engineers with the opiate crisis. Carl, he's going to say a few words because he's got to get going.
Thank you, Paul. I'd just like to thank the other speakers that are up here today for their insight and their wisdom on this issue. As with any cause, you need the advocates behind it to push it forward and make sure that we get some action taken. So thank you, each and every one of you, for what you do and how you do it. We all do it a different way, with the end goal is to take the stigma away. Take the stigma away from homelessness, from drug addiction, from whatever the issue is. We need to talk about it, we need to educate, we need to take action. That being said, you stole half of my talk. But that's okay. I wrote a few more notes while I was sitting over there. As Paul said, my name is Kyle Zimmer. I'm the Health and Safety Director of the Operating Engineers here in Connecticut, Local 478. And we represent about 3,000 working men and women in the field of construction, heavy equipment, cranes, dozers, backhoes, you name it, that digs dirt or lifts things, and we have a hand in it. With that being said, our international union is in all 50 states of the United States and all the provinces of Canada, and we have about 400,000 active members, both in the construction field and what's called the stationary engineering field, plumbing, HVAC, building maintenance, and things along that line. And the reason why I mentioned the international is because we are one of the few building trades union that have taken on this issue head on. And I am very proud and humbled to say that the program that we started in Connecticut, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute, has now gained national attention to provide peer support people on the job sites throughout the US and Canada when people are struggling with lifestyle issues. And the lifestyle issues I like to talk about are addiction, suicide prevention, and behavioral health issues. All of these things, Paul mentioned the heroin epidemic, but all of them are intertwined. They're intertwined, and if you really start to dig down and educate yourself on it, people are codependent on one another, and addiction and behavioral health issues go hand in hand, and the suicide and homelessness, it all intertwines. So we need to figure out how to address it holistically rather than individually. When Joanne put up the causes of homelessness, I had printed out the top 10 causes of homelessness, and on the top was addiction. And I'm seeing that in our industry because we have working homeless people. And we have it at an alarming rate, even in the building trades. Now, when people hear about union construction workers, they think of good, fair wages and good benefits and a pension and all the things that come along with being in organized labor, which is very important. But I also deal with people that are losing that every day. I worked with a gentleman a couple of months ago that came in, and he was struggling hard. He was in crisis. He was losing his family. He was losing his job. He still had some of his benefits left. But I said to him, I says, how much are you spending a week on illegal drugs? And be honest with me. That's the only thing I ask when I'm helping people, is be honest with me. He was spending over $600 a week on illegal pills, just so he wouldn't get sick. Not even getting high anymore, going for the euphoric effect, just so he doesn't get sick. $600 a week. And here he is bringing home $1,400 a week from working construction. So by the time he gets done with his expenses, you know, on the drugs, on whatever else he's doing to support the family, he's losing everything. He was going to be homeless. It's communicating with people to avoid so they don't take that final slip into the abyss. You need to go out and support these people. Identify and support. It's so important that we have open communication. And of course, the opioid epidemic, everybody is aware of it. I used to start my presentations when I started the Members Assistance Program by asking how many of you have ever heard of anybody with an addiction problem, or you know, your friends, your neighbors, family, maybe yourself if you want to say something. And you know, you get one or two hands up. Now I usually ask how many aren't affected by the opioid crisis. And no hands go up. Everybody has been touched in this room, I'll guarantee you, with the opioid crisis. And it's time that we get uncomfortable and start talking about this. And that's the name of our internationals program, believe it or not. It's time to get uncomfortable, to start talking about things that people don't want to talk about. One thing that I've done when I was starting working on the international program, and I am very blessed through my local leadership and our international leadership, that I have been asked to head our international program. So my general president, over to 400,000 people, and I were sitting there one night, and he said, what do you think about this whole crisis thing? And I said, I think you need to do something about it. And pointed my finger at him, and I said to myself, well, I could have just shot myself in the foot. He could fire me, or I could, you know, hit it out of the park. Well, he looked at me and he says, well, then do something about it. And you have my support. I'm blessed to have a local leader here in our union that gives me the opportunity to go out and do this. So we started building a program. And I was sitting in my office one day and I said to myself, I said, I need something that can relate to the working man. How do we break down the stigma about substance abuse, suicide prevention, and behavioral health? And I started thinking, every construction worker in this country is subject to safety training. Whether you're union, non-union, whatever, it doesn't make any difference. At one time or another, they get a safety talk. Whether it's through OSHA and the OSHA 10 and 30 construction programs, or whether it's toolbox safety talks. And I started looking at it. Now, I've been in the safety business in construction since 1979, believe it. Don't let the boyish good looks fool you, I'm old. And I've always been taught that there are 4 categories that OSHA looks at for fatalities and major injuries on a construction site. And that's electrocutions, fall protection, struck by, and caught in between. And since the inception of OSHA in 1972, when we had over 12,000 construction deaths a year, they have whittled that down to about 400 construction deaths a year. That's pretty good success, right? But yet, out of addiction, suicide, and behavioral health issues, we lose probably 12 to 15,000 construction workers a year to those 3 categories. Suicide is 4 times the national rate in construction. Addiction is 16% higher than the next general industry down, which is retail and hospitality industry. We lose in this country 74,000 people a year to opioid overdoses, accidental overdoses. That's incredible. People are going to work and not going to work. If you're an addict, what are you looking for? You're looking for your next fix, right? You're getting up in the morning, you're getting ready to go to work. By lunchtime, you're shake, rattle, and roll, and you got to have something. So you leave the job site, you find a porta potty, you find someplace to use your drugs, whatever the drug of choice might be. We are putting people behind the controls of $1 million machines, lifting and pushing and digging, that could be impaired, that could take somebody else's life because they're not present at that moment. Hence the term presenteeism, meaning that you're there, but you're not. You're thinking about something else. Now, this doesn't always just go for the active user. It goes for people that are struggling to help somebody else, maybe your son, maybe your daughter, maybe your wife, boyfriend, close friend that you know is in crisis, and you're wondering where they are at 2 o'clock in the morning. You wake up, your kid's not home yet. You know they're out doing something that they shouldn't be doing. So are you coming to work the best that you can be? And this just isn't in the construction trades. It's in the workforce all over. Amen. Whether you work in a factory, retail, hospitality, whatever, teachers, pilots, it doesn't make any difference. All of these ancillary things affect us. And what do owners want to hear? What's the only thing that owners care about? The money. Well, it's starting to affect them in their pocketbook. And now that's starting to turn their way of thinking also, and they want to partner with us. One thing that I never did in 4 years prior to last year is I never gave a talk at an employer. Now, in Connecticut, we represent 370-something or 340-something employers. Now, all of a sudden, most of my talks this spring, starting the construction season, has been to the employers because they don't want to lose any more people. They're realizing it's costing them money. So, how twisted that might sound, it also might be a blessing in disguise, okay? Because now they're starting to realize that it's labor management together. Again, whether it's union or non-union, I don't care. Unions are very strong in this. We have the ability to make a change. But it's got to be labor and management together to affect that change. And Ron and I were talking earlier, it comes from the bottom up, meaning the workers need to buy into this, and it has to come from the top down, meaning the employers need to support it. Going back to our general president and the conversation I had with him when I pointed my finger at him, I says, it starts with you. He looked at me and said, what do you mean it starts with me? And I said, if you say it's okay, a program will be born and it will take off. But it needs to come from the top because each and every person of those 400,000 union workers that are under you need to know it's okay to talk about it. And he did it. Last May, we had a general convention, our 39th general convention, and there was a resolution that was submitted and passed saying that the IUOE would support and work to build members' assistance programs throughout the country and Canada, throughout the U.S. and Canada. And with that being said, that gave the locals the okay to talk about it. And the response has been overwhelming, to the point of where we fast-tracked, and that's where I have to leave after I have to get going. I have to leave to do the final review. We fast-tracked a peer support person training course, which means that there's going to be, starting the 1st of May, or 29th of May, a 4-day, 40-hour training course for workers in the field at the IUOE that want to learn more about this. And they will be certified when they're done to go back out and be able to communicate with people in crisis on the job site. But it's much more than that. It's communicating with people in crisis all over, their private life, their family life, so they'll have the tools to spread that word. The drug issue that we have will change, but it will never go away. For those of you young enough in this room or old enough in this room, remember the 80s with the cocaine and the drugs and what was going on. You know, it was a recreational drug. Well, those drugs don't exist anymore. They're much more potent. They are much more available than they ever were. You know, cocaine used to be the drug of the rich, right? It cost you $100, $200 on a weekend to go get a bag of cocaine. And back then, that was a lot of money. Now it's, you know, $20, $15 cheaper. And it's laced with synthetics. And that's what's killing people. That's what's killing people, the fentanyl, the dilaudid, and everything else that the drug dealers, their opportunists, are mixing it with so they can get more profit. That's what's killing people. I've had young members that I've worked with, or members' children that I've worked with, and asked them about their drug use, and several of them, with one line of what they thought was cocaine, started their addiction process. So these are the issues that we have to educate ourselves about. We have to talk about more. We have to bring it to light. You made a statement that I didn't think that I'd end up being homeless, was one of the quotes. Well, if you talk to somebody who's struggling with drugs or alcohol, I never thought I'd end up being an alcoholic. I never thought I'd end up being an addict. And one way that you can remove the stigma and start the education process is to remember that addiction is not a moral failing. It's a disease. It's a disease. And I can honestly say it. At one point in my life, I had one foot over the edge and the other on the banana peel. And the resources weren't there that there are today. So encourage anybody that's in crisis to reach out, to talk about it, to get the help that they need, and to work through it. And Paul, Paul's doing wonderful work. He has my number. If you ever need anything, the resources are incredible. And our program's far-reaching. I work with apprentices up in Fairbanks, Alaska, to our brothers and sisters at the Boston local, and everybody in between, to get the help that they need. And you'd be surprised the networks that are out there with one phone call. People can put you in contact with different people. So with that, I'd like to leave you with one thing. If you don't know, Pam is here from Connecticut, and on this year's Connecticut's annual awards night dinner will be on May 17th at the VFW Hall at 152 Massimino Drive in Berlin at 6 o'clock. And more importantly than that, Connecticut will honor Paul Venti as the recipient of the Ed Egan Award this year. And the Ed Egan Award is I kind of like it because I got it last year. So I'll say it's a very prestigious award. How's that? That recognizes people that give back to the community in the field of health and safety. And when the board was talking about this award this year, this is a health and safety issue. It really is. It all ties back to workers' health, workers' safety, and workers' well-being. Paul and I go back a little ways. In particular, the day of February 7, 2010, when clean energy exploded and 6 tradespeople lost their lives, and many of them were close personal friends to Paul. I didn't know them. I knew who they were, but they were close personal friends to Paul. And the way that Paul remembers these workers every year is just totally incredible. And we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary this year, and we're planning a big event. So, keep that in mind. Put that in your calendars. Whether you're a union worker or not, come on up and see what we're all about and see what we do. But, Paul, that award is so well-deserved, and it's an honor. So, thank you. Thank you, folks. We'll see you again.
Thanks, Joe.
You got it. Take care.
Wow. A lot of people that are strung out on drugs are in denial, and denial is not a river in Egypt. It doesn't discriminate. Drugs does not discriminate. It knows no age. It has no boundaries. And I had another life years ago, but by the grace of God, I'm here today. Now, I got one more speaker to come up, and then I'm going to do a short presentation, and I won't keep you folks any longer because I know it's been long. It's gone on a little bit longer than we expected with some guests that I didn't know were coming. But I got a brother over here that's a carpenter in a carpenters union, and he was homeless. And he bounced back. He got his life back up on track. And his name is Timmy Yankee. And he's got an organization called Hope for Homeless. He sent me and Joan gifts in Hudson, Florida from up here. sent me bags, sent me socks, sent me T-shirts, things that homeless people need. So everybody, let's like to introduce Timmy Yankee.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Timothy Yankee, a carpenter from Local 326 and the founder of Hope for Homeless. I was asked to speak up here about what we do at Hope for Homeless, but there's a lot more than just what we do. To everyone we encounter, we distribute coffee, hygiene items, women's sanitary products, hats, gloves, food. We don't ask questions. We don't take counts. We feel that it's better to interact with the homeless population on a personal level. We want to just find the issues that lead to homelessness, opposed to just treating people like statistics. Prior to discussing Hope for Homeless, I would like to discuss one of these issues that leads to homelessness. Not a cent of our donations goes towards this, but the video and an email definitely will. One of the major issues that we encounter is the reintroduction to society after prison. When someone gets sent to prison for selling drugs, they find that drugs are easier to get in those walls. If an individual gets sent for assault, we are putting them in an environment that's consistently violent. No matter what we sent them to prison for in the first place, when someone comes out of prison, they return to the same life they had before. Depending on who they met in jail, they might even get worse. See, our perspective was to find a way to restructure the judicial system without removing jobs, to determine a way to reform an individual while benefiting their position in society. I'm personally proposing that we begin a program that gives our judges the ability to correct a constituent's path, to find a new perspective instead of relying on an age-old program that no longer works. I believe that we can teach people respect, responsibility, and teamwork to change that person's future, instead of giving them a life bouncing between prison and the streets. At a judge's discretion, we could place that individual in a program based off the values they would learn in boot camp, minus the weapons training. When the program has ended, we can offer them to continue training. We can give them a military career with the ability to go through college and own a home, when the current option only sets them up for failure. See, we're finding the deeper issues that lead to homelessness. We don't want people just passed off to programs that won't work. We want to correct the issue before homelessness is even a thought. So what about us? What does Hope for Homeless want to see in their future? We want to begin helping those individuals who have come back from protecting our democracy, expecting a parade and finding nothing more than a case of PTSD and no clue where to go. We're hoping to begin a quiet, tiny house community for veterans who need a cushion prior to them ending up on the streets, a place where they can live in the comfort of nature and find their footings. They can go to therapy, find a job, get life started, and then move on to a regular day-to-day life. We believe that every veteran deserves respect. And if we can't house every veteran who lies on the street as people step over them, we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that that man or woman, that hero, never ends up on the street in the first place. I'm Timothy Yankee, founder of Hope for Homeless. I'm currently looking to form a board who believes that they can help put the gears in motion. I want a union board with good members showing this country who we are. I believe that we can solve every possible issue if we only start viewing it from every perspective. From prison to addiction, we believe that there are ways to get people off the streets and help them find their place in society. If you would like to discuss more of our opinions on how to help other issues, you're more than welcome to ask. Now, of course, that we would love to help everyone. I personally believe that housing is one of the major issues in society needs to work on. I remember hearing that banks caused the housing market crash. The banks gave people loans that they can't afford. I know it goes deeper, but that stuck with me. I thought, we are the ones who build these homes. If anyone has children that you know since childhood, we've attempted to pass the blame. But we are the ones who build these homes. We, not union men, but people as a whole. We build these 2-floor, 1,200 square foot homes and want someone to buy them. That is the norm. That person or family could easily live in a place half, if not third the size. The extra money could be going towards bills, groceries, and vehicles. They would have more money to go to places and boost our economy. It's not the bank's fault. They would rather have 3 smaller loans being paid and revenue coming in than a loan in foreclosure, another home sitting waiting to be sold with only 1 out of 3 making profit. It's what we offer them that makes the difference. We could begin life in a smaller home and use the equity when we are ready to step up and buy some larger homes. It's not about minimum wage hikes. It's about living where we can afford comfortably. You need to realize that we have a dollar menu when you raise the overhead, but you can't make sure that and employees can live off their current wage. And I myself, of course, is from Hope for Homeless. Yes, I was homeless in the past. For a long time now, the past 2 years, I've been a legal 501c3 nonprofit. Like I said, we have been discussing this with many homeless individuals. What comes across us, my personal feelings, what I've encountered while I was living, bouncing from my car to different people's couches. I put that all behind our program. And I'm up here today speaking as well with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, from a traumatic brain injury and subneural hematoma that I suffered back in 2004. I was not a veteran. I was robbed. I was killed. I was dragged to the side of the highway and left for dead. Ever since then, I've known how people felt. I was arrested for an unconstitutional arrest. And when it was over, I was the individual looking for a parade. All I found is myself going nowhere. Myself literally living on a couch. And when I did get off that couch, and when I did find my footings, when I did actually get stability in my life, I started dedicating every moment that I had, every spare second that I had, to helping people who were in the same position that I once was. Thank you, and God bless. Sorry for talking so quick.
These are my mentors today. These are my teachers. These folks taught me a life lesson. 10-year veteran right there living in his wheelchair. He has an umbrella when it rains. That's his living out of a dumpster in the back of the Big Y. 3 people that have dogs. We feed homeless dogs also. Those dogs eat better than the homeless people do. I wait every morning before I go out. When I go out, I bring her breakfast. That's Hatchet. He's a pit bull. I found this guy sleeping one morning, brought him some food. Don't even know his name. Donations I get, I pass them out to the homeless. 22 veterans a day we're losing to post-trauma stress disorder. This guy brings his kids to him when he works. He's the one from Home Depot, Joan. There she is again, sleeping in the woods, down a little patch of grass. 5-year-old kid coming out of the woods with his mother. Coming out of the woods, it wasn't a camping trip. Lisa Pizza, my favorite. She's a hoarder. She's my favorite, Lisa Pizza, love her. Joan and I threw her a pizza party for her birthday. That's his house in an abandoned parking lot. There's hope for homeless right there, thanks to this man. Look how thin she is. Kids are getting pushed around in shopping carts. They can't afford a carriage. Here he is again, Irvin, 10-year Army veteran. Lisa Pizza again. Christmas Day. Christmas Day. He's dying of cirrhosis of the liver. Another veteran. She lost a good friend. She's paying respect. Got robbed, got stabbed. I ran out of food that day, so I had to go to the dollar store and get more for these folks. Now, back in January, this young lady over here was going to come to our house. We can start the other one. And visit and see what we did. Because did you tell how we met? Joanna?
I don't remember. Did I?
Well, our good friend Tommy Larkham, who's somebody that I grew up with, Rich Delgadio and Joan know him, was at an event in South Carolina, one of her events. One of our art shows. And Tommy bought some of our art, and she started talking about the homeless. He says, I got a friend in Florida that I grew up with that does the same thing. He sent me a donation, and he sent me one of her books. Right away, I called her up. I reached out to her. I got in touch with her. We started talking. I told her what I wanted to do and put this together. And I said, instead of coming to my house in Florida, I'll meet you in Atlanta, Georgia, because I got a friend there that does wonderful, wonderful things with homeless. I went to their hall. They welcomed me with open arms. That's the business manager. They gave me knives, stickers, and pins. They welcomed me with open arms. Local 72, Atlanta, Georgia. This kid here with the beard, you can go to the next one. His name's Steve Zen. That trailer behind him was his idea. You see, Steve fell 33 feet. He broke both his arms. He broke both his legs. He fractured all his ribs. He broke a bone in his back. He was a basket case. He was in a hospital for months. Keep going, hon. He got strung out. These are some of the people we visited. He got strung out real bad on drugs, like we talked about. And when he ran out of the prescriptions, he started self-medicating. He became homeless. That's Green Eyes in the middle. But keep going, hon. There she is. There's my friends. We went to his house. We stayed at this house. And he started self-medicating. He became homeless. And he did some crazy things and got locked up for 14 years. 14 years he spent behind bars because of the crazy things he did because of his addiction. And he had a talk with the big guy. He said, Lord, when I get out, if I can stay clean and sober, I'll give one person a day that needs something what they need. I'll feed one person a day. But it went way, way, way beyond that. You see, he had an idea and he put it together. He built these trailers. He brought the idea to his local, and they ran with it. It passed on a membership, passed on a floor. They built these trailers. They got the apprentices together. Hold that one right there. And he built this trailer that's got a shower in each one. It's got heat exchangers here with the mechanical, and toilets and sinks. Now, he goes to homeless camps, and he gives people showers. And one of the things when I talk to homeless people, when I sit down in their camps and talk to them, what do you miss the most? Just like you heard from some of these other folks, I miss a hot shower. And he does that. He gives them a hot shower. He has to get a police security, he has to have a cop there. He has to have a permit. He has to get water. He has to have a backflow preventer. And he has to sterilize each and every shower after it's used. And he's got to give them toiletries. And he's got to give them towels, and he's got to give them underwear. And everybody steps up to the plate and volunteers. They donate the food. He goes to the supermarkets. They donate food. This guy is my idol. Steve Zen is my idol. Here's a guy that was locked up for 14 years, turned his whole life around, and each and every single day of his life, he's working with the homeless. We visit him. We slept in his house. I loaded up my car. We went to the dollar store. We got a bunch of groceries. We went on some homeless runs. It opened my eyes. It opened my eyes. Steve carries a Narcan with him because the opioid crisis is so big out there. He brought 3 people back. And unannounced to me, I never knew this, but what he told me is when they have a big event in Atlanta, Georgia, like the Olympics or a big convention, or they're going to have Super Bowl, the cops will go around and they'll give everybody a bus ticket to get out of Dodge. If you do not leave, they will write you a ticket for loitering or sleeping on the street. Then, when you don't show up in court, you get arrested for failure to appear. So they bring you to jail and they start the whole process of arresting you and putting you in jail. Now they have the event. Geez, this place is great. There's no homeless out here, man. They're all gone away. This is a great place. We should move here. Wow, Atlanta's great. After the event, what happens? They're 30 days locked up. They got back on the street. It's a revolving door. I mean, it's just crazy the way this is. But we met this one guy. The first guy we fed out there, his name was Roustabout. He was an old black dude. And he was an interesting character. His thing all day long was to go to convenience stores. He'd go to 7-Elevens or Winn-Dixie's or any store where there was garbage cans in front of the stores. And he'd take the scratch tickets out. And he'd go through the lottery scratch tickets. And he says, you would believe how many people throw winners away. And that's how he eats. That's how he eats. And he would rather be in the street than in a shelter. Because everything he has is in that shopping cart. Everything he owns, his whole life is in that shopping cart. And they won't let him bring it in the shelter. So it's pretty amazing. I mean, this has been a lifetime of experience these folks have taught me. I mean, I can go on and on and on. But in closing, I'd like to just leave you with a thought. By the way, Lisa Pizza hand wrote these notes to me and Joan for the pizza party we threw for her birthday. And I thought it was kind of special. But in closing, I'd like to leave you with these thoughts. You know, when a group of people come together for the better good of other people, what Bob Smyman does with the Missions of Mercy, what Marilyn and Tony do when they feed, okay, I won't go there. When all these people just come together for the better good of other people, it's amazing what you could do. Never dreamed, never had an idea that this would get so big. I mean, like I said, we find packages on our doorsteps. Don't even know who sent them. Don't even know who to thank. It just, bags of dog food. It's just overwhelming. So my best friend, Joan, always tells her grandkids, whenever she talks to them, whenever she says goodbye before she says I love them, she says, make somebody smile. And that's what it's all about. Put a smile on somebody's face. Each and every day of your life, do one act of kindness. Just one act of kindness. You'll make a world of difference. And with that being said, I want to thank you all for coming out and spending your day with us. I hope you got something out of this. I want to thank our friends here, our Gold Star parents. I want to say God bless you all. And if we could all just stand up and say the Our Father in the close, that would be great. You could all just hold hands, please. As we say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. God bless you all, man.